Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I'm Pat Jones. I'm chair of the board at Pine Street. And although I'm a longtime supporter and admirer of this great organization, I've never been prouder or more excited or optimistic for Pine Street than I am today. We gather here for a very special announcement, one which will significantly impact the trajectory of Pine Street Inn's future and the future of vulnerable individuals experiencing homelessness in Boston. I'd like to introduce someone who has dedicated her entire career to this work, who has guided Pine Street Inn in evolving from a hut and a cot that is a meal and a place to sleep for the night to an organization with a bold vision and a strategy for solving the challenge of homelessness in Boston. Please join me in welcoming Pine Street's President and Executive Director, Lyndia Downie.
Good morning, everybody. And I want to say thank you to Pat for his leadership and support. You know, when you take on the role as chair of the Pine Street Inn board, it's not easy. And then, of course, you have to deal with the pandemic and all these things that we didn't tell Pat. So I have got to say thank you to Pat's steady hand, certainly over this past year and a half, and to our board members who are here. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for allowing us to let this vision about ending homelessness be real. So appreciative of the board. And the board's been with us through tough times these past few years, but today is one of those really good days. And I have to say, after the year we've all had, to have some good news, it's just, I can feel it. It's just lifting everybody's spirits. We know we live in a very expensive city, one of the most expensive cities in the country. And if you struggle to find housing, you work in a low-wage job, you suffer from substance use, if you're mentally ill, there is no pathway out of homelessness for many people, and they end up living in our shelters and on the street for many years. And as Pat said, pound and pound's not enough. We need to do more, and if we're really going to reduce the numbers, we have to figure out how to get to the real solutions. And I'll tell you, I haven't met anybody else in my 30 years here who said to me, gee, can't wait to grow up and be homeless. Can't wait to grow up and live in a shelter. Can't wait to grow up and live on the street. Nobody wants it. But every single day, our guests, the folks we work with in our job training programs, they get up every day and they try really hard to get out of here. And they work really hard to change their own circumstances. But I'm so proud and thrilled to be here today to tell you that our longtime friends and supporters at the Yawkey Foundation are making a transformational gift. I'm going to hold it together. I practiced this morning so I can hold it together. It's a $15 million gift. The largest gift in our 50-year history. 50 years, our largest gift. I can't tell you what a game changer this gift is going to be. We will use it towards building an additional 400 to 500 units of new housing, which for us is a 50% increase. The funds will be used to help pay for support services, which is vital to helping people stay housed, right? It's not just the folks here. Some people here just need affordable housing, and we work really hard on that. But there's a group of folks who need housing plus some degree of support so they can hold on to their housing. There's no other alternative for them, which is why we've really put a stake in the ground and said supportive housing is the way for us to go. We actually know what to do. We know this works. Last year, in our 850 units of housing, we had a 95% retention rate, which means if you moved in a year ago, you were still there a year later. And that's because the glue that the support services provide really make it possible for people to not just get housed, but to hold on to it and to really thrive and to move on to something else in their lives. We've known what to do for a long time, folks. We have not been able to resource it, and we have not been able to get to scale. This gift is going to make it possible for us to get to scale, and I can't even tell you how much that means. And I want to do a shout out to Sheila Dillon, who's here for a minute. Sheila is absolutely our partner in crime. And we spend a lot of time trying to figure out where do we find additional sites, how do we fund it, and how do we really move the dial on homelessness. And this is going to do that, make no mistake. You know, we've had a relationship with the foundation that goes back well over 30 years, back to Mrs. Yawkey. Mrs. Yawkey was a donor when she was alive, and at one point, many years ago, my boss, who hired me here at Pine Street, we went to a game, and I think my boss, Rich Ring, called John Harrington and said, "Can we go up and say hi to Mrs. Yawkey? We're going to the game." And we went up to the box, and she was keeping score, and I went over to say thank you, because even back then it was substantial support. And you know what she said? She said, "It's my pleasure, and I should be thanking you." She could not have been more gracious. And to have this kind of history, this gift, it's unbelievable. You know, the Yawkeys understood the importance of our mission. Over these past 30 years, they've given us close to $4 million towards our work. Jean had a special interest in women and women's causes, and we'll be naming the women's inn behind me, Yawkey House, this coming spring. So I want to introduce the people who have made this possible. Our longtime dedicated partners and friends from the Yawkey Foundation, the CEO and trustee, Maureen, Bleday, and Reverend Dr. Ray Hammond, who many of you know, who's a trustee and chair of the grants committee at the foundation.
Thank you, Lyndia. Thanks so much for such a gracious introduction. I'm delighted to be here today, along with the Foundation's other trustees, John Harrington and Debbie McNulty, and Reverend Dr. Ray Hammond, who you'll be hearing from shortly. As Lyndia noted, the value and partnership between the Yawkey Foundation and Pine Street Inn spans decades, and it has led to this moment. This $15 million gift is possible because of the foresight of our founders, Tom and Jean Yawkey, who are quietly dedicated to helping the most vulnerable get access to basic needs that everyone deserves, like food and shelter. More than a year ago, several of us met with Lyndia in our large conference room out in Dedham. We were, of course, safely distanced and masked, but after years of working together, we felt it was important for us to sit down together, to talk through what was happening, and see what more could be done to help alleviate the suffering among the homeless. As a major funder of human services in the city and region, we needed to get a better understanding about the pandemic and how it was exposing already existing cracks in the shelter system. Based on those conversations and many more conversations with our other dedicated nonprofit partners in the front lines during the pandemic, the trustees moved quickly. We were able to provide relief through $4 million in grants to 60 nonprofits in Boston and gateway cities, including Pine Street Inn. But beyond that immediate response, our conversations with Lyndia helped us to understand that once the pandemic is over, we have to do all we can to ensure that things don't return to the way they were before. It was clearer than ever that to move the dial on solving the stubborn, persistent problem of homelessness, permanent supportive housing would need to be part of the solution. When it comes to creating affordable housing, Lyndia and Pine Street have a proven track record of being innovative and persistent. They are always finding creative ways to secure stable, safe housing for their guests, and they do it responsibly, with sensitivity to their neighbors and with attention to financial viability of the housing that they create. The projects they tackle are complex, and even when they identify properties, raising the needed funds to develop and support them can be daunting. COVID has presented grave challenges, but it may also be presenting unique opportunities for a new paradigm in the solution to homelessness. Lyndia and her board are convinced, and they convinced us, that the right resources and accesses to nimble sources of capital, Pine Street will have the ability to respond swiftly to market opportunities and effectively increase the city's inventory of permanent supportive housing in a meaningful way. In short, they'll be able to bring people, especially the most vulnerable among us, home. We're looking forward to following and supporting Lyndia and Pine Street on the journey ahead. On a personal note, it's difficult to overstate how much all of we at Yawkey Foundation admire the work being done here by the committed staff at the Pine Street Inn. The team works tirelessly to provide practical and caring support to homeless men and women, and they do so with humility and compassion. We know that Jean Yawkey genuinely enjoyed meeting Lyndia in 1989, and we believe that Jean and Tom would be deeply inspired by the lives changed through Lyndia's incredible leadership and the collaborative partnerships that she has forged with other nonprofits to make lives better for so many. Lyndia's right. Jean was deeply committed to helping women in poverty become stable and self-sufficient by getting them the resources and support they need. Therefore, it is meaningful and humbling to the trustees that Pine Street Inn has proposed naming the Women's Inn after the Yawkeys, and we are all deeply honored. I'd now like to introduce someone who really does not need an introduction. As a valued trustee of the Yawkey Foundation and chair of the Foundation's Grant Committee, Reverend Dr. Ray Hammond is doubtlessly someone with whom most, if not all of you, are familiar. Reverend Ray is an esteemed leader across so many communities, faith, civic, nonprofit, and humanitarian. He's a treasured friend who touches so many lives, and it's my pleasure to welcome him to the podium.
I am so glad to be here. I haven't seen some of you since before the pandemic. You look great. I want to take a moment also to particularly express appreciation to two old comrades in neighborhood ministry, Monsignor Frank Kelly and Father Jerry Austin. I'm so grateful to have both of you here. By the way, take a minute. There's somebody near you that you don't know. Would you just tell them, it's almost freezing out here, but I'm glad you came. On behalf of Deborah McNulty, John Harrington, and myself, I really want to reiterate how glad I am to be here as a trustee and to be with you today. And of course, we've got to acknowledge Lyndia and the Pine Street staff who work with guests and tenants every day of the year and help them access the basic needs that nobody should go without: food, medical and behavioral health care, job training and placement, so that they can be safe, and stable, and comfortable in the house. Now, some of you know I'm a pastor and a medical doctor, and in both of those roles I've seen the importance of the safety net in helping people overcome society's most intractable and stubbornly persistent challenges and inequities. And there's no part of that safety net that's more important than housing. Because housing is so much more than a roof over your head. For many, it's the first step in successfully navigating their journey from the streets and shelter to a home of their own. It's housing that enables them to rebuild their lives, to reconnect with families and communities, to achieve economic mobility, to get better health outcomes, build supportive relationships, and acquire dignity. What we're seeing unfold tragically on Mass and Cass is really an example of what can happen in the absence of those things. How tenuous living situations can become in just the blink of an eye. All it takes is a bridge closing, or as many working or middle-class families have discovered, a shift in the economy that causes a job loss, an eviction, or foreclosure, a bout with substance use disorder, or an unanticipated medical expense. When you layer on top of all of that, in the context of a global pandemic, the tragic consequences are increasingly widespread among those who never would have dreamt of landing in such circumstances. Were they alive, we are very confident that Tom and Jean Yawkey would not only have cared about this, they would be trying to change it. The concept of home held a really special place in Tom's heart, particularly because he lost both of his parents at a very young age. And it meant a lot to Jean, which is why in 1986 she purchased property to help establish what is now known as the Yawkey Family Inn in Brookline, which is a home away from home for families of patients receiving medical care at Boston Children's Hospital. It's also the reason that in the 1980s she reached out to Kip Tiernan at Rosie's Place, and the two of them went on to develop a close relationship that was as deep as any sisterhood. And it was anchored by their mutual dedication to helping Rosie's guests find a home. And of course, there was Paul Sullivan, a college classmate of our chairman, John Harrington, who worked through significant struggles and challenges. John watched Paul navigate those depths at the Salvation Army Center around the corner from Fenway Park. But out of the depths of those circumstances, Paul went on to become Pine Street's first director in 1969. John and Jean Yawkey became among the earliest supporters of Pine Street Inn. As I close, I'm reminded of that story about the young boy who played the part of the innkeeper in the annual Christmas play, and his only line was to tell Joseph and Mary, the parents of Jesus, "There is no room for you at the inn." When the time came to say the line, he said it loud and clear, but then immediately found himself confused and wondering, how could I possibly turn away these poor people whose baby is just about to be born? That was the line he was supposed to speak, and in his mind he understood those words. But his heart said something else. And before he could stop himself, he called out to a retreating Mary and Joseph and the baby to be born, "But you can come to my house." Since 1969, Pine Street Inn has been telling all those, the destitute, the bankrupt, the mentally ill, the recently incarcerated, the needy of every stripe, who have heard over and over again, "There is no room for you." They've been told by Pine Street that you can come to this house. And in this house, find the support to find your own house and rebuild your own life and make your own contribution to our human family. And that's why the trustees of the Yawkey Foundation consider it a privilege to make this transformational investment in Pine Street, so that together we can make a measurable impact on ending homelessness here in Boston. That's exactly what Tom and Jean Yawkey would have done. And in their memory, that's what we do here today. Thank you so much.
I tell you, no one should ever follow Ray Hammond. I'm afraid. Oh, really. Couldn't have been better said. And, you know, to the shout out to the staff who are here, what a year we've had. And I just want to say thank you for hanging in, making it happen, and keeping people safe. You know what's funny about this thread? That Paul Sullivan, who started Pine Street, knew John. They were classmates at BC. My good friend John Whistler was also a BC classmate. And the reason I came to Pine Street, I'm off script by the way, I'm going to get yelled at later. The reason I came to Pine Street, and it's a thread from John to Paul Sullivan, is that John Whistler wrote an article about Paul Sullivan, Paul getting sober, and starting Pine Street Inn. And my colleague, my roommate when I left college was a BC grad, and she was somewhere one day, and I was waiting for her, and I picked up the magazine, and I read that John Whistler article about Paul in BC. And about 2 weeks later, I was looking for a job, and I saw an ad in the Boston Globe, and I applied for the job. That is the God's truth. And when I met John Whistler like 5 years later, I said to John, "You know, you're the reason I'm here." And he said, "You read my article?" And I said, "Yes, I did." But anyways, I just think about that thread, and so thank you to John Harrington. So listen, next I'm going to introduce someone who's staying at the Women's Inn, who very graciously has agreed to talk. And you know, it's not easy to stand up with a bunch of people you don't know and tell them what's happened in your life. So Debbie's going to come up in a minute, and she said she's used to doing this because she goes to AA meetings on a regular basis and is used to talking in front of a crowd, so she's not worried about that. But Debbie, come on up. And
thank you. What a relief to be here. Hello everyone, my name is Debbie, as Lyndia said, and I'm a guest here at the Women's Inn. Never really expected to be here, though I must say the history is amazing. And one thing I really loved, my dad was a BC grad, and today was his birthday. He would love this. And since it's also Pearl Harbor Day, I'm doing these remarks in loving memory of just people. My dad. Sorry. I never really thought this was part of my retirement plan, but here I am. I am a nurse, and I worked as an acute care nurse in many of the acute care hospitals here in Boston for a good 35 years until I lost my job. I think it was 10 years ago. And it was when the economy had tanked. So it was great. I had 2 years of unemployment. So for the first year I played. I had marvelous time. And then the second year I thought, well, I need to get down to brass tacks and, get a job. Well, back when I was job hunting, 35 years before that, it was easy. It is no longer easy. I do not have a baccalaureate degree. I am an old-fashioned diploma grad, and that makes it very, very difficult in the city to get a job. They wanted a baccalaureate degree. So I kept going on interview after interview after interview, and not even getting responses. They wouldn't even call me and say we gave it to someone else. And I have a history of major depression, and the depression finally kicked in. And I can remember sitting and binge watching DVDs. That's all I would do. And this voice every once in a while would say, the money's gonna run out. Because I had no source of income at that point. The unemployment had run out. I'd gone through all my retirement funds, everything. And eventually it did run out. So I spent a little over 3 years living in my car. And finally she was making a funny noise because of course I didn't have money for oil changes. Thank God she was enjoying them. And she lasted. And the mechanic I took her to said, don't drive this car. So I called a friend of mine who owned a Dunkin' Donuts. Yeah, or not Dunkin', forgive me. So in London, that's what it was. In Jamaica Plain where I lived in. And he said, oh sure, I parked your car there, that's not a problem. And I parked the car there and she died. So I kept living in my car until finally one day 2 Boston police officers stopped and said, hey, what gives you? We keep seeing this car here. 2 of the kindest, politest, they were absolutely wonderful men. They treated me very, very well. A lot of compassion. And they said, well, we have someone in the station who just takes care of people like you. We can work with you. And one of the officers asked me, is it okay to take your information to my boss? So I said, sure, why not? And I gave him my name, my phone number, and that was about it. And of course my phone lit up like it was crazy the next day, and it was like, whoa, it scared the heck out of me. I was just being on my own, living in my car, But for some reason, when the Pine Street outreach person called me, and she said, oh, we can meet you anywhere, wherever you are, we'll come and we'll be there. And I said, oh, okay. And that was kind of strange for me to say okay, because I did say no all day to these phone calls. And the outreach people worked with me for months. Never pushed me. They were very, very kind. Helped me with whatever I needed help with, and did not push shelter because I was very anti-shelter at first. Which actually is kind of funny because the best job I ever had my entire life was the old Boston City Hospital. I adored that place. It was deranged and I loved it. It also was populated in part. A lot of patients were homeless people, people in shelters. And yet I had no concept of what a shelter was until I finally came here. So like I said, Jim and John kept meeting with me every week, and they kept being kind and being helpful. And so finally, Paul called me, the friend who owns 7-Eleven, and he said, they're getting after me, I've got to move your car. Well, that's when I knew I had to do something. I could not live in the dead car anymore. And I talked to John and Jean, and they said, there's a bed at the shelter for you. So they also agreed to put stuff in storage for me for a while. Because I had a car full of stuff, I was like, what am I going to do with this? And I was 64 at that point. I came in here, I remember it was the middle of May, because my sobriety date in AA is the end of May, and they gave me special permission to go to my meeting that night, because I was going to be out very late till about 11 o'clock at night. And the people, that's were like, don't worry about it, go get your medallion, because at that point it was 30 years. And they were that's how they've been to me. It's since day one. Everyone has been so kind. I think I was kind of shell-shocked. I don't remember the first week here real well. But after that, I started remembering and knowing who people were. I was here about a week and I realized that my lower extremity was swelling, which had been a problem in the past, so that my doctor had even done a heart workup to make sure that wasn't the problem. It wasn't. That had gone away. Sleeping in a real bed, a real mattress. I had 3 meals a day. I'm diabetic. I didn't have to worry about where I was getting things because they were supplied. When COVID shut everything down, they lowered the number of going over here. They made room for us so we could sit, kind of over 6 feet apart, pretty darn close. We wear masks in the shelter. When I came in here, I was 64, like I said. I turned 65 and was like, hey, the nice thing about getting old, you get money. It's great. And I started getting Social Security, so I had an income for the first time in 3 years. I also have Medicare, which, thank God for Medicare, it pays my health insurance, or pays for things. With the Social Security, I with a little bit of it, and since I'm here at the shelter and I don't have bills, I'm able to set money aside every month, and I've built up a nest egg, so when I do get a place, I can get the blender and get all the fancy things that I want to have in a nice place. I have a case manager who helps me in looking for an apartment. I made things difficult by saying initially that I'd only lived in Jamaica Plain. I lived there for 25 years now. Now I've loosened up. They made a referral for me, and I'm now in the Elders Living at Home program, which is over at BMC. I have a little bit of problem being called elderly, but other than that, it's very, very nice, and the workers there are very nice to me. I've had my health problems here. A year ago, last month, I had to have surgery for breast cancer, and then it was followed by a course of radiation. The staff, some guests have been wonderful, just wonderful. The staff has been absolutely phenomenal. I couldn't say enough nice things about the people here. They're just wonderful. In September, I had a stroke, which is why the walker. I used to walk with a cane, but I had the stroke, was in a hospital for a while, and then went to rehab, and they welcomed me with open arms when I came home, and they've been kind and considerate and thoughtful. I'm now battling uterine cancer. I'm going to have surgery next month. I know they will save a bit for me because I'm going into the hospital, so when whatever that happened to be, I don't know. But when I'm ready to come back to the shelter, a bed will be here for me. And I know that, again, that I'll be treated with kindness and dignity. And I'm very, very grateful for the kindness of them. I don't know where I would be right now. Certainly don't know if I would even be alive right now, to be honest with you. But Pine Street Inn has been very, very good to me and given me a roof over my head, 3 meals a day, a nice place to sleep, and really wonderful people. I couldn't ask for more. Thank you.
Debbie, thank you so much for sharing your story. I wish you well. I hope you soon have a place of your own.
Thank
and
you.
enjoy the comforts of home. Thank you all for being here today. Thanks especially to the Yawkey Foundation, to Maureen, Bleday, Reverend Hammond, for advancing Pine Street's work in such an extraordinary way, for your unwavering support over the years, for your faith in our work. We look forward to updating you as we move forward and put this gift into action. This concludes our formal program. Please join us for refreshments, and for any press who may have questions or want to speak to any of today's speakers, we ask that you move up towards the front and connect with Stacy and Meg, and they'll arrange an interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.